Greetings, programs. Burnt Out Gamer here, and I am back again, and I thought this time we'd start taking a look at my NES collection and take a look at some of the highlights that I have. So let's get into it. So before we get into it, I just want y'all to know that these are in actually no particular order. I have close to 200 titles in my NES collection, and I figured it'd be kind of fun for us to kind of go through, take a look, and just kind of get into each one a little bit. A lot of these don't get a lot of attention, so I figured this would be a great opportunity for all of us to just kind of see some titles maybe we don't know about, maybe we do, but in any case, I thought it'd be kind of cool. First up, Double Dragon. Now this is the very first beat 'em up I ever played, and it pretty much started the love that I have. I think beat 'em ups are probably my favorite genre in video game. I love them all. I keep playing them to this day, and I think this is probably where it all started, with Double Dragon. Now it was originally an arcade port. I do remember playing it at the arcade, but once it came and hit home, that's really where it all started. I mean, having instant access to it at all times right there in your bedroom, yeah, you couldn't beat that at all. I honestly don't think that this title gets as much love, or the series as a whole, honestly, gets as much love as it deserves. You know, Streets of Rage and some of these others have, you know, got remakes, got upgrades. This one did several years ago, you know, Double Dragon Neon, but it was horrible. It got horrible reviews. People did not like it. The controls were pretty shoddy. I played it a little bit, but you know, it's nothing to write home about. I really think that, you know, the series deserves a Streets of Rage 4 type remake, just to kind of like pay homage to all of it. You know, go through the original ones, 1, 2, and 3, the Super Nintendo one, and just kind of see all those elements and just kind of pull them there, tweak the gameplay, make it just beautiful. Yeah, I think it would go over really huge. I think a lot of people would love it, and I would love to see it. Continuing my love of old school arcade ports and beat 'em ups, P.O.W. Prisoners of War. Now I love beat 'em ups, as I just said, but this one added a little tweak at the time. I mean, we're talking about the NES, old school Nintendo type area, so you didn't really have a whole bunch of options. Everything was still being built on, and this one added weapons, you know, brass knuckles, guns, that kind of thing, that kind of tweaked gameplay. So I mean, that added a whole new highlight to it, and it felt different. This one, it was pretty neat. They also added the ability to like enter buildings at the time and fight enemies in there and get power-ups inside there. That was really cool. So I mean, the whole just vibe of the game, breaking out of prison right off the bat, and then, you know, sneaking through, fighting waves of enemies, it was just very, very compelling. Now, if you've been following along with any of my videos, you know that I'm not really a sports ball kind of guy when it comes to gaming. But there are times when certain games, or certain sports games, or games that are in that genre, I guess, do stand out and I can't get enough of. And that all started probably with Blades of Steel. I love that game. I love it all the time. I remember playing it back in the day, and I didn't even play hockey. I don't know why it grabbed my attention, but I couldn't get enough. I think the gameplay was so crisp at the time. I think that's what really pulled me in, and it had enough things, enough special little tweaks that set it apart from all the other games at the time. Included in that are the little mini games that happen throughout, like the fights. You know, you keep bumping into the same guy repeatedly, and you guys end up going into like a fist fight, and whoever wins gets to go away with the puck, and whoever loses gets knocked out and goes out the game for a little bit. Completely awesome. There's also a side scroller shoot 'em up game during halftime. Just little things like that at the time, since games are still so simple, really, really stood out. Games like this were also awesome for couch co-op. I mean, that's one of those things that people keep talking about in these days, but it really did get lost in the time. Being able to sit down next to your friend and just play a game right there in the moment and getting that reaction and feeding off each other's energy, it can't be described. And games like Blades of Steel are perfect for that kind of thing. So, going along on the whole sports game front thing, T&C Surf Design. I loved that game as a kid. I mean, is it really a sports game? I mean, skateboarding, surfing, I mean, it's extreme sports, so I mean, it got more credibility at the time as, you know, today, but at the time, I mean, were they? But regardless, I thought it was awesome. It's set up like a mini game type thing where you just kind of go through and face the different challenges, and they're all, you know, like I said, extreme sports, but they're all fun. They are kind of hard in general. I mean, the game does take some practice to get used to, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it never got really frustrating, but it is kind of a challenge, so be aware of that if you want to check it out. I personally discovered this game at my babysitter's. Now, as a kid growing up, I used to go to a babysitter with several other kids. It was kind of like, you know, she had this huge house and there was a group of us, and with enough of that, she would always go out periodically and pick up a huge selection of NES games. And, you know, like, I guess not huge, but, you know, for us, when you're 8 and all of a sudden she walks in with 8 NES games that she just picked up at the store, your mouth just drops, and it's amazing, you know. And over time, as she's done that, you know, she has 50 games. So, you know, when you go over there, it's just a la carte buffet of what you want to play. And yeah, it was kind of like renting, honestly. You know, there were so many times that I got to play games that I never would have experienced otherwise. She just had just a shit ton of games for us to be able to play, and T&C was one of those. Rolling right along on the list, and it's kind of a strange offering to some. You might not all like it, but it's Star Trek 25th Anniversary. Now, I am a huge Star Trek fan. I've always been a huge Star Trek fan growing up. My parents are Star Trek fans. My dad was a huge sci-fi nut, and I inherited that. So, when I seen this as a kid, I, again, was completely hooked and drawn in. Now, it wasn't the kind of game I usually played. It is effectively just a puzzle game. Of course, being Star Trek game, what else would it really be at the time? But I was still completely drawn in. It's all set up around being lost and having to go planet to planet to collect things and, you know, get what you need for your ship to be able, the Enterprise, of course, to be able to get back home. So you have to go through and figure out what items you need and what you have to do to overcome obstacles, which again is the puzzle aspect. It's all really awesome. It borrows heavily from the TV show, and each area you go to is kind of like individual episodes. So you can pick your crew, and sometimes you pick the wrong crew and you can't progress. So you have to go back up to the ship and bring down other people. But all of it is really neat. And again, probably not for everybody. It is set around TOS, the original series, so I mean it's really old, but it's still really fun. And as a old school Star Trek fan, I could not get enough of this as a kid. Now, being that this is the first video featuring my NES collection and me going through random highlights that I wanted to share with you all, I had to have a Mario title on it. And what better Mario to start out with than Super Mario Bros. 2. Now, Super Mario Bros. 2, it was considered at the time the black sheep. A lot of people didn't really understand why everything from the original Super Mario Bros. Was not there for the most part, except for Mario, Luigi, and, you know, Toad and all that. But all the enemies were different. Everything was completely strange. Now, we all know, of course, why that is nowadays, because it was just a palette swap and all that. But at the time, I mean, we didn't have the interwebs to tell us that. So it was just like, whoa, what the hell is this? But I still loved it. I played it a ton, over and over again. I have beat it several times. I think it's a great game. I think even nowadays it holds up. I think at the time, though, it did shock a lot of people. One thing I do really think that was awesome about it is it did spawn a huge Nintendo merchandising spree that I think had really lasted to this day. Because if you go through, and I love collecting not just video games, but video game memorabilia and, video game collectibles, especially vintage ones and retro ones, and old school Nintendo items, especially the Nintendo, Super Mario Bros. 2 era, that they had so many unique items that really stand out, that are really awesome. And it just kind of blurred Super Mario Bros. 1 and Super Mario Bros. 2 since they came out, and just this weird Nintendo mixture, because they didn't really have their licensing right, or really, no guidelines set back then. So, I mean, pretty much anything and everything went. If you take a look at old school Nintendo products, you'll be kind of surprised about what you find compared to like what you'd see today. Now, of course, going from one black sheep, I had to go to another. And also being that this is my first NES collection list, again, where would it be without a Zelda title? And it had to, of course, been Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. Now, I rented this game so many times from our local IGA when I was a kid that my parents decided just to buy it for me because I just couldn't get enough of it. Now, I loved the original Legend of Zelda. It was one of my favorite games of all time. It's still one of my favorite games of all time. But once this one rolled around, I immediately dove into it. And the sad thing is, I have yet to beat this game. I've never beat Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link in my life. And I'm kind of ashamed to say that in a way. Maybe in 2023, I'll beat it. I was thinking about it, making a push. I have a Retron 5. I know some people consider that cheating, but with the save states and everything, maybe I can kind of inch away at it and kind of finally put it on my completed list. I would hope maybe I'll do that. I'm thinking about doing that. Now, the game was a huge departure from the original Legend of Zelda. It went from that top-down to a side-scrolling thing, and it also added that light RPG type element, and yeah, it shocked a lot of players. And there was a real big reason why. Because of that, they never went back to that format. Immediately when it came out for the Super Nintendo, it went back to that old school approach. But I didn't care. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was, at the time, completely cool. So I suggest, if you never have, just for nostalgia's sake, just for history's sake, give it a try. It's out there in so many different ways that you have to play it, just so you know why, where, and the reason why they never went back for it. Alright, so we're closing out this list, and I figured we'd do it with kind of a banger here. And that one would be Super C. Now, this was my very first Contra that I've ever played in my life, and I think that's probably why it's my favorite, but I still cannot get enough of this game. I have so many good memories of this. I remember playing this game at my New Year's Eve party. Well, it wasn't my party, but it was a party that all of us going to. My parents and my friends' parents decided to have their adult party at the house, and the kids would all come over to our place. So you had, a house full of kids. This was, of course, 1990, I think, because I'm old. So, they have no shits given. So a house full of kids that are there unsupervised, and we're playing just Nintendo all the time, doing all kinds of crazy shit. And this was one of the games that we kept going back to over and over again, just seeing how far we could get. I remember, we also watched Ghoulies that night. I don't know why that sticks out. You guys remember Ghoulies? Yeah, that was one of the movies we all binge watched that night as well. Going back to that co-op thing that I mentioned earlier, me and my sister would also play this all the time, couch co-op, seeing how far we could get. I remember the thing was that she would use the spread gun and I would use the fire gun, and we kind of thought like that would offset each other, so strength and weaknesses, that was our logic in there. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with that, dude, and that's what it's all about. This kind of thing is just looking back on those fond memories and remembering little stories like that, playing Super C with my sister. Great times. I believe that Contra as a whole is also one of those retro game series that needs to come back with a new, beautiful, back to its roots version, like Street Fighter 4. I think a new Contra setup in that regard would be amazing. I think pulling all the elements from old school Contra games and then cleaning it all up and putting it out there like that, I think would just be an astounding game. So, what do you guys think? Let me know. So, programs, that was just a few of the titles in my NES collection that I wanted to go over with you. I will be putting out future videos like this, but I thought, you know, these were just some of the few highlights that we'd start out with. Have you ever played any of these? Any of these that you have good memories with? You ever hear of these at all before? I'm sure, obviously, some of these you have. But let me know in the comments what you thought. You know, any that you'd like to see on here? Maybe I have them. Who knows? But remember, force push that like button, ring the bell, all the good stuff that people always tell you to do. And always, always, always do remember to be excellent to each other. And until next time, have a good one.